Hello again, everyone, and welcome to session 4 of Security with our friend Ken. Ken, it is so great to have you back with us.
Hi, Andrea. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So today we are going to be launching into what I know is your favorite topic of them all, and
Absolutely.
this is passwords. You and I were just chatting before I hit record, and you said this is the single biggest thing. So we thought that we would give it its entire own segment. So if you are here for the password segment, you are in the right place. And Ken, why don't we just launch in? Why is this the biggest thing?
So why is it the biggest thing? You know, these days passwords are everywhere. We need them for just about everything we're going to do online. And as we've said before repeatedly, you know, security is the enemy of convenience, or convenience is the enemy of security. And passwords are our first and sometimes our only line of defense when it comes to online security. If your passwords aren't meeting the bar, you are exposed from a security standpoint. So I think it behooves everyone to think very carefully about their passwords and do what they can to, you know, beef up that level of protection as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And so before we get into details, I think it's worth just quickly looking at how passwords get used, because that changes how they need to be sometimes. So, you know, we've talked before about how a password is used to authenticate you. It proves that you are you. And that's probably how people see passwords 90% of the time. And it also raises one of the issues that people have with passwords. And because, you know, when I say passwords need to be really, really good, they go, well, why? Because if I'm logging into somewhere and I get the password wrong 3 or 10 times in a row, I'm done, right?
Yeah,
it forces me to reset. So why do they need to be that good? Because nobody's going to guess my password in 10 tries or less very often. And that's true. But, and this brings us to the second way passwords are used a lot of the time. And that is behind the scenes, so we don't normally see this, is passwords are what's used to encrypt your data at whatever organization you're trying to log into, be it your bank or Facebook or whatever. Back in the day, if you wanted to keep something safe, you'd lock it in a safe. And to get it out of the safe, you needed to know the combination or have the key. Online these days, if your data is encrypted, the key to get it back is your password. If that organization gets hacked, those limits on the number of attempts you can make go out the window. They don't apply. If somebody can sneak into an organization behind the scenes, they've got all day, every day to be trying to guess your password. And they're not sitting at a keyboard making guesses. They're actually using specialized software to make the guesses.
Right.
And that software can make billions and billions with a B of guesses like in minutes. So in order for your password to protect that data, is you want it to be good enough that it will take those software programs literally years and years to be able to guess your password.
And you're going to tell us what makes it good enough, correct?
I absolutely am,
okay.
Right? So when I say a password needs to be strong, what it really comes down to is it needs to be strong enough that a password cracking piece of software will take a lifetime to crack it. That's what strong really means. And that's why ultimately passwords need to be really, really good. It's because of that, not because you're logging into something through a web page.
Right.
And then the third way passwords get used is for other things that aren't necessarily online, but it's your Wi-Fi password. It's your getting access to your laptop, getting into your phone, your tablet, things like that. Because I find people don't think about this too much. I mean, these days, you go visit someone, somebody comes to your house, it's usually, first question is, what's your Wi-Fi password? Now, in our last sessions, we've talked about the importance of, if you're doing something really critical, it should be on your home network with your own machine.
Right.
And the underlying assumption there is that your home network is secure. If you give out your Wi-Fi password to other people, that is no longer the case. What you need to be doing is, for anyone outside your household, practice social distancing with your Wi-Fi network. If they don't live with you in your household, they need a separate Wi-Fi network. And pretty much all the equipment you have these days will allow you to set up what's called a guest network. It's like a second network that's separate. All those people need to be on that. In addition, any other equipment that you bring into your house that isn't your personal computing device, be it phone, laptop, needs to be on that separate network as well.
Right.
So smart TVs, streaming boxes, light bulbs, baby monitors, all that stuff, keep it away from your main network. Because the manufacturers of those devices don't really care about security that much. And if you've got a device that's been hacked and you put it on your main network, you've now opened up an access point into your main network, which is something. And the second sort of point I wanted to bring up is, the password that you use for your laptop does nothing to protect the data on your laptop. So I think people just need to be aware of that.
And that's because the hard drive, correct?
Exactly. If I was to steal your laptop, I don't need to know your password to get into it. I just open it up and take the hard drive out, and I've got access to all your stuff. So So you still want a password that keeps people from just getting at your machine on a day-to-day basis. But if it gets stolen, that password is not going to help you. Okay. So back to passwords. So hopefully now we all understand why they need to be strong. So what does strong actually mean? So simply put, a good password is at least 12 random characters long. There's no words, no phrases. And unfortunately, people aren't very good at creating passwords like that because they're really hard to remember. And, on the screen below, I've written another one that might look random to people, but it's actually very, very weak as well. So I'll put you on the spot. Do you have any idea why that would be a weak password? Because it looks pretty random.
Well, Ken, I've seen this before. So I'm going to give our friends who are watching this 3 more seconds to figure it out, and then I will tell you my answer.
Okay.
It is not random.
Nope.
Because if you look at those letters and look at your keyboard, you will notice that they are in that order.
That's right. It's basically a diagonal pattern on the keyboard. So while it looks random, that is not going to slow down one of those software password cracking programs at all. So like I said, people will naturally tend to try and use a pattern for a password, and that's a very bad thing. So passwords need to be strong. The second big one is they need to be unique, i.e., every single password you have for every site, everything you do needs to be different. Okay,
Ken, I hear you. But how is that a practical or even possible suggestion?
We all have this problem. So a huge industry has actually sprung up to solve it for us and reduce that inconvenience factor down to the point where we've got good security without being blown out of the water from a convenience standpoint and spending 5 minutes every time we have to log into something. Right. So what is that solution? It's pretty simple. It's called a password manager. And this is essentially a piece of software that takes over that for you. Basically, they will create your passwords, they will remember them, and they will put them into the websites for you. This is now a huge industry. There's a lot of different options. So I just want to outline for people sort of 3 basic ones that you can't really go wrong with. So the first one is good news, is free. It comes with my favorite browser, which is Firefox, as I've mentioned before, and they call it Lockwise. And simply put, if you turn that on, anytime you go to log into a site, it will pop up and go, hey, either do you want me to remember this password for you, or you can go in and actually generate one and it will create it for you. So that's Firefox. All browsers do this to some extent, but I really prefer Firefox because what they do is they actually provide a master password that controls access to all your passwords within the browser. The other browsers do not, which means if you're sitting in front of Chrome or Safari, your passwords are just there.
Right.
And if somebody else comes and sits down in front of your machine, they also have access to all your passwords. Mm-hmm. Whereas Firefox requires that master password. So that's why I like it a little bit more.
Right.
So that said, Firefox is free, which is good, but I do recommend people take a serious look at the paid options. Okay. There are a ton of these out there. And, you know, I have not reviewed them all personally or gone into details, but two that people just generally cannot go wrong with. One is a Canadian company called 1Password, mm-hmm. and the other one is called LastPass. I have no association with either of these folks. I'm not going to get any kickbacks if people go and start looking at these folks. And there are many, many other ones out there. And the paid options do some things that the Firefox one doesn't. A couple of things worthy of note is they will let you add just other random information. Mm-hmm. So you know all those security questions that you sometimes have to remember the answers to, mother's maiden name, who you first saw Star Wars with, whatever it is. The paid options will allow you to put answers into them and remember those for you. Right. So you should just be making up answers to those questions. Don't use anything that anybody else could possibly guess. You know, who did you first see Star Wars with? Frankenstein. You know, whatever you want it to be.
Right.
And then you don't need to remember it anymore. The password manager will do that for you.
Got it.
The other thing that's really, really useful is sometimes passwords need to be shared. Mm-hmm. Like we talked about the Wi-Fi one, for example. Netflix. Yeah, exactly. So sometimes you do want to share passwords, right. And password managers make that easy and safe to do it, right? So that's another big plus for them. And now that you're using a password manager where you don't care what your password is anymore, remember that 12 character limit I talked about goes out the window. Just make it 32. Because if you do that, it will literally take billions of years to crack. So, you know, you're pretty safe. People will be long gone and stop caring by the time their passwords get cracked.
Right. So this makes sense for the passwords that are in the password manager. Yeah. But in order for a password manager to be any good, it has to be protected by the password. So how do I create a password that is good enough for a password manager that I actually have to remember myself?
That is an excellent point, because clearly you can't have the password for your password manager inside your password manager.
Correct.
Right? So what I recommend people do is that they come up with a phrase that they're not going to forget that is easy to remember. And I put an example. It's not a great example on the screen below us here. So you come up with a phrase like, I went to Disney World when I was 6, the witch was scary, and I was glad to get home, which was at 16 Privet Drive. So, you know, the password then becomes that string, right? Which is essentially just the first letter of each word with some capitalization, including numbers and punctuation. Now, I'm not suggesting it needs to be that long. In this case, you're back at around that 12 character limit again. If you have a good phrase that you can remember, it's burned into your brain and you will never forget it, and it's got punctuation and letters in it and numbers, you're good. Now, after you've used it for a little while, it just becomes muscle memory and just boom, 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 and it becomes really easy to use. And that's what I recommend. For anything that you can't use your password manager for, like your laptop even, is use this method for generating a memorable password.
What happens if I forget that one?
If you forget your master password for the password manager,
yes.
As a very general statement, if you can recover your password, that actually represents a weakness in the security of the password manager, because somebody else might be able to pretend to be you.
Right.
A common mechanism for defending against this is, let's say you use 1Password or LastPass. When you set up that account, when you do that, you will get another piece of information that they will generate for you, is your recovery password, for want of a better name. And that's generated at the same time.
Okay.
And that is associated with your account and never changes.
Okay.
So the master password for all your passwords, you can change anytime you feel like it. But this very secret one over here never changes. So
Right.
if you forget that password on a daily basis, you generally have that fallback.
Okay.
I think the key is that there's not a process that you can go through to recover your password. Because if there is, run away from that password manager. Write it down, put it in a safety deposit box, or write it down backwards and put it in the middle of a book on the shelf, or something, right?
So one of the questions that I have is how often I should be changing my passwords.
If you're using a password manager, as we suggest, and have really good, strong passwords, my advice would be not to change your password except when you need to.
Okay.
So the question then is, well, how do I know I need to?
Yes.
That is another thing password managers do for you, including the free one in Firefox, as well as 1Password and LastPass that we talked about. They actually monitor these things. And if they see notification of a breach at a site that you have in your password database, they will flag it to you.
Okay.
And then you should absolutely go in as quickly as possible and change your password then and there. Other than that, there is no real need to do it. If you feel like it, sure, it won't do you any harm, but it's not necessary, except if there's a very good reason to do so.
So recognizing this is not a one-day job, where should I start? What is sort of the most important password we have?
So we've talked a little bit about this before, and in general, if you ask people, they'll say it's their banking information, but your email one is hugely important as well, because if your email password is not really, really good, people can do an end run around your password manager. And so it doesn't matter how good your banking password is if your email one is bad. So let's say I wanted to hack into one of your accounts. I know your email address.
Yep.
Which a lot of times is the username that people use.
Right.
I go, okay, so I know Andrea uses a password manager, so I don't stand any chance of cracking her password. What am I going to do? I'm going to try 10 times with just garbage, because I know that will fail. At that point, a reset link will get sent out to your email address. And of course, we don't have to do any of that if there's a reset link already on the page. There's no point putting in passwords that don't work if I can just hit the reset link and get that through your email directly.
Yes.
So if I have your email password, I now have that reset link.
Right. So you can make the password whatever you
So
want.
now I can make the password whatever I want it to be. So for that reason, it's not just your password manager's master password that guards everything.
Right.
It's also your email password that is also guarding everything. And a lot of people don't realize that.
So email first, everyone.
Email first. Figure out what your email password is and turn it into one of those really, really nasty ones in your password manager. I mean, I encourage people to research them online, look at the features, and decide, what's right for them.
Right.
The message is, please use one of some kind. Let's say you use a password manager and your password's 32 characters of gibberish, and the site comes back and goes, sorry, it's too long, or you've used symbols and we don't allow symbols, or something. At that point, you should be starting to go, oh, wait a minute, what's going on here? Because frankly, in this day and age, there is absolutely no reason why there should be any restrictions whatsoever.
Okay.
So if there are restrictions, you need to be asking yourself, first, that question we talked about before is, how much do you care about what you're going to be doing with this site?
Right.
And if you care a lot, then look at the restrictions and figure out, can you still get to, let's say, 16 characters of gibberish within the restrictions that they've set? What you really want to watch out for is length. It's like getting on an airplane where, if the engines are grinding and the tray tables are broken and the aisles dirty, are you going to trust that machine in the air? if the security that's facing you on the website is bad, how much do you trust what's going on behind the scenes? So it's just an indicator that they might actually not know what they're doing or not care, or both.
Right.
So
Ken, you've given us a lot of information here around a very short subject. So we have a lot of work to do. I know one of the things that I will be walking away with is a card that says, practice social distancing with your Wi-Fi network. That is a highlight for me.
Okay.
I'm wondering for you, really after this conversation, what should people be walking away with?
I think the single key message to walk away with is use a password manager.
Okay.
Period. Whether it's one of the free ones with some limited functionality like Firefox, or even the other browsers, that's still better than doing nothing.
Some is better than none.
Absolutely. As a piece of homework, just get your feet wet, go to your favorite browser, whichever one it is, and pick a couple of online accounts and just try setting up the password with the built-in password manager in your browser.
Great homework.
Right. So, I mean, I cannot emphasize enough, like we said, passwords are everyone's first and a lot of times only line of defense online. So they really have to be as good as you can make them.
Okay. Well, Ken, thank you so much for taking the time to walk us through this. I know that you are open to receiving questions if people have any concerns or need some more detail or want some recommendations. So people can send those questions to me, and I will, of course, forward them on to you. So don't be afraid to do that, everyone. But Ken, you and I will be back with another section coming up in the days to come. So everyone can keep an eye out for that. And in the meantime, go do your homework.
Absolutely. Yep. What we're going to be focusing on moving forward is more sort of privacy aspects to being online as opposed to just pure security. So
awesome. Thank you so much, Ken.
Thanks, Andrea. Take care.
Bye.